9.5% for the current year and 6.8% for the next year. That's what is expected. But don't you think 9.5%, close to 10% of the GDP, isn't that a whopping figure?
See, the fiscal deficit number has to be seen in a perspective. We are amidst this, corona pandemic, which is a very, very unusual. Anything which in the recent, memory,
Okay.
not in our generation, but then almost about 100 years back, at the time of a Spanish flu, 1919.
Okay.
It is that kind of a pandemic, the whole world and our country also is undergoing. During the last 10 months, this entire country was struck by this pandemic. We had a initial period lockdown,
That's true.
then slowly relaxation.
Opening up of the...
Then economy got impacted, the jobs got impacted, the daily life of people got disrupted, and then thereafter the economy started coming back to rails and also now showing the signs of recovery. During this period, the government came out with several packages.
Okay.
Atmanirbhar package. In fact, each of those packages could itself be termed as a mini budget.
That's true.
Now, in that backdrop, this particular budget had to come, and this budget could be seen not as an ordinary budget, but this budget is something which can, which can address these problems of the created by this pandemic situation, and then also that post-pandemic, what will be the kind of economy that we want our country to take to, in which direction our country has to go. This is the budget, first budget of this decade.
That's true.
Also, we are coming close to our 75th year of our independence. Now, in this scenario, and particularly the whole, in the world, entire world, the economic order, the post-pandemic is going to be a new order.
That's true.
And in fact, the finance minister in her budget speech has said that in this, the Asia, and then also within Asia, the India will be, will have to play a very, very important role. So we have to prepare our country in that direction. Now, in this situation, if any such, and in these difficult times, who can spend the money? Who has the capacity to spend the money? It is the government.
That's true.
Because to expect the private investments alone will be sufficient. The answer is no. So therefore, the government had to come in and spend money. Now, this money is not that the money will get spent in any manner. It has to be a quality, spending of money, and that quality is basically, you have seen in the budget on the health sector. More than 135% increase in the health. The capital expenditure, infrastructure, 34.5% increase over the last year's one. Similarly,
That's
the
huge.
agriculture. Similarly, if you see the financial, the sector, lots of reforms. The privatization of 2 banks and 1 general insurance company.
Okay.
IPO of LIC. The IDBI, the privatization, plus monetization of public assets, the land. So all those things, and in addition to that, the simplification of the tax structure, reduction in compliance burden,
So it's a
increasing
complete
the cap
package.
base.
Yeah.
So all those things, and considering that this 9.5%, the fiscal deficit, because we had to spend money, our revenue resources were limited. But this is something, and then if you see the next year, and then the year after that, we have also given the glide path.
Yeah.
Because, it's not that the money, this kind of a money will get spent, this kind of a deficit will be continued for years.
I wanted to come to that point, from 9.5%, very next year you are coming down to 6.8%. So isn't that a huge reduction in expenditure?
No, if you see, why this is happening is that in the next year, we expect, our revenue growth to happen, and whether be it the tax revenue, we are estimating the increase of 16.9%. Similarly, in the non-tax revenue, this investment is going to give us 1,75,000 crores. So now if you consider that, the expenditure level is almost going to be the level of this year, that is about more than 34 lakh crores. So if that, and with increased revenue collection, we expect that our fiscal deficit will come to the range of 6.5, 6.8,
8%.
which is quite realistic.
लेकिन पंडित जी, आपको क्या लगता है कि कुछ एक्सपेंडिचर में भी सरकार कुछ रिडक्शन करेगी टू कंटेन द फिजिकल डेफिसिट, या एक्सपेंडिचर में भी उतना ही इंक्रीज होगा जिस तरह से रेवेन्यू में होगा?
नहीं, ये आप ये देखें कि जहाँ तक कि इस साल का अगर देखें, जो अभी करंट ईयर है, जो कि मार्च में ख़त्म होने वाला है, इसमें भी देखिए कि हमारा बजट एस्टिमेट था करीब 30 लाख करोड़ का। लेकिन ये कोरोना पैंडेमिक से लड़ने के लिए, और हमें जो कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट करना है, और हमें जो बाकी सब एरियाज़ में इन्वेस्टमेंट करना है, जो एक्सपेंडिचर करना है, इसलिए हमने अपना जो एस्टिमेट, रिवाइज एस्टिमेट में 34 लाख बढ़ाया। इस कारण से फिजिकल डेफिसिट 9.5 गया, क्योंकि हमारा रेवेन्यू थोड़ा सा इम्पैक्टेड था। हालांकि पिछले 2-3 महीने में रेवेन्यू में सुधार आया है, जीएसटी में सुधार आया है, इनकम टैक्स में भी सुधार आया है, लेकिन इसके बावजूद भी 9.5 है। और ये सब जो एक्सपेंडिचर है, ये क्वालिटी एक्सपेंडिचर है। तो ऐसा हम लोग जब एक बार बजट में जब हम कह रहे हैं कि हम इतना, हमारा रिवाइज एस्टिमेट होगा या बजट एस्टिमेट होगा, तो इसका मतलब कि हम लोग सीरियस हैं कि इतना हमें खर्च करना चाहिए, और इसमें कोई कटौती करने का कोई कारण बनता नहीं, क्योंकि ये सब काफ़ी सोच समझ करके, और ये मैं कहूँगा कि ये क्वालिटी एक्सपेंडिचर है। अगर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में अगर 5,54,000 करोड़ अगर खर्च कर रहे हैं, कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट 5,54,000 करोड़, एग्रीकल्चर में भी एक काफ़ी हमने एमएसपी किसानों को उचित उनके जो प्रोड्यूस है उनको उचित कीमत मिले, और इन सब के लिए जो हमने जो हायर एलोकेशन दिया है, उसी तरीके से हेल्थ सेक्टर में अगले साल करीब करीब 140% का इंक्रीज हेल्थ केयर में हमने डाला है। प्रिवेंटिव, क्यूरेटिव और हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, इन तीनों चीज़ों पे, एग्रीकल्चर के भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे काफ़ी बल दिया गया है। तो अब ये सब हमारे बजट में आया है, तो अब इसको तो कोई रिड्यूस करने का तो कुछ कारण बनता भी नहीं है, क्योंकि अगर ऐसा करना, अगर कमी करना था तो फिर हम लाते ही क्यों?
जी।
Right. Yeah, but as far as health is concerned, health is also under the ambit of the state government, and especially primary and secondary health care. Surely, it's predominantly the state government's responsibility. So, how do you plan to coordinate your act with the state governments, respective state governments, so that there is better efficacy at the ground level?
देखिए, हेल्थ स्टेट सब्जेक्ट है इसमें, और इसके बावजूद भी सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ये जो इंक्रीज एक्सपेंडिंग है, और मैंने जैसे पहले कहा कि करीब करीब 140% से ज़्यादा, और इसके कोरोना के वैक्सीन का कॉस्ट से लेकर के वैक्सीन का लॉजिस्टिक्स, मतलब डिलीवरी, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन, कोल्ड चेन, और फिर फाइनली जहाँ पर जो वैक्सीन एडमिनिस्टर्स होंगे उसके खर्च, इसके अलावा जो बाकी जितने जो खर्च हैं, तो इसमें स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का भी काफ़ी रोल रहने वाला है, क्योंकि ये और प्लस स्टेट गवर्नमेंट मिल करके ही हम लोग इस दिशा में हम आगे बढ़ सकते हैं, और इसमें दोनों को साथ में काम करना पड़ेगा।
हेल्थ सेक्टर की जैसे आपने बात की, तो हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस में कितना सरकार का बल है? क्योंकि बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया, आम आदमी को अगर इंश्योरेंस नहीं है तो बहुत सारे लोगों को हेल्थ की जो भी फैसिलिटीज़ है उनको लेने में काफ़ी दिक्कत आती है।
अब ये देखिए कि जो आयुष्मान भारत जो है, एक तरह से देखा जाए तो एक तरह से एक बड़ा एक इम्पॉर्टेंट एक हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस ही है, जिसमें ये करीब करीब देश के 50 करोड़ लोगों का, और पूरे देश में हर जगह तरह तरह के क्वालिटी ट्रीटमेंट्स, क्वालिटी हॉस्पिटल्स, इन सब जगह पे उनके ट्रीटमेंट का काफ़ी उनका उपाय किया गया। तो इस तरह के जो इंटरवेंशन है, उसी तरह से हर ज़िले में एक मेडिकल कॉलेज का और उसके एक मेडिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, तो ये सब भी सुविधा स्थापित की जा रही है। तो इसके अलावा जो लोग अफोर्ड कर सकते हैं उनके लिए भी हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस का, और हमने एक जनरल एक पॉलिसी कि इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर में, अगर आपने देखा कि इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर में एक काफ़ी हम इसमें डेवलपमेंट हो, काफ़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट हो, इसके लिए भी इस बार जो एफडीआई की जो लिमिट है वो 49% से लेकर के 74% तक कर दिया गया है। तो इन सब चीज़ों से भी देखें तो अगर एक इफ़िशिएंट इंश्योरेंस की व्यवस्था अगर आती है, उसमें अगर कंपटीशन होता है, तो उसका भी लाभ अल्टीमेटली जो कंज्यूमर है, वो हेल्थ सेक्टर का हो या किसी और सेक्टर का हो, लेकिन उसमें भी अल्टीमेट बेनिफिशियरी कंज्यूमर होगा कि अगर कंपटीशन आए, अगर वर्ल्ड से अगर सब में इन्वेस्टमेंट आए, सिस्टम हमारा एफिशिएंट बने, तो इसका फ़ायदा भी एक हमारे जो आम नागरिक है या हमारा जो कंज्यूमर है उसको होगा।
Yeah, Mr. Pandey, you're also the revenue secretary, and today we saw how the stock markets gave a huge thumbs up to the budget proposals. The corporate India and especially the stock markets were let go scot free. No new imposition of any tax. Was it a very thought out plan? Despite the fact that stock markets are very very buoyant, especially in the last 2-3 months, Sensex crossed the 50,000 mark as well.
देखिए जो टैक्स की जो व्यवस्था करते हैं, हमें अब उस मानसिकता से निकलने की कोशिश करनी चाहिए कि हर बजट के समय में हम अपने टैक्स रेट्स को टिंकर करते हैं। कभी हम बढ़ाते हैं, कभी हम घटाते हैं।
Right.
एक टैक्स व्यवस्था में एक स्टेबिलिटी ऑफ टैक्स रेट वो बहुत ही आवश्यक है। आपको याद होगा कि करीब 1.5 साल पहले हमने कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रेट हमने कम किए। आज दुनिया में हमारा जो कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रेट न्यूनतम है, उसी तरह से पर्सनल इनकम टैक्स में काफ़ी हमने कमी की। अब इस तरह की व्यवस्था के लाने के बाद फिर से अगर 1-1.5 साल में अगर हम फिर से अगर टैक्स रेट में अगर टिंकर करें या बढ़ाएं,
probably that would give a wrong signal.
तो ये इतना वो उचित नहीं रहेगा।
लेकिन काफ़ी
तो हमें व्यवस्था ऐसी करनी चाहिए कि अगर टैक्स अगर ज़्यादा अगर कलेक्शन करना है तो हमारी कलेक्शन इफ़िशियंसी को बढ़ानी चाहिए।
Okay.
कंप्लायंस हमको रिड्यूस करना चाहिए और सिस्टम को कंप्लायंस की तरफ ले जाना चाहिए। तो टैक्स बढ़ाना, टैक्स रेवेन्यू हमें आना चाहिए, टैक्स टू जीडीपी रेशियो बढ़ना चाहिए, लेकिन इसके बढ़ाने के लिए टैक्स के रेट को बढ़ाया जाए ये कोई ज़रूरी नहीं है। आपने देखा होगा कि जीएसटी में पिछले 2-3 महीने में टैक्स काफ़ी हमें अच्छा मिला। हमने क्या टैक्स बढ़ाया? क्या जीएसटी के टैक्स रेट बढ़ाया? क्या टैक्स रेट तो नहीं बढ़ाया। लेकिन फिर भी अगर जो पहले 95,000 से 1 लाख करोड़ मिलता था, अब 1,15,000 करोड़ और 1,20,000 करोड़ मिलने लगा बिना टैक्स बढ़ाए हुए। तो यही चीज़ दर्शाता है कि टैक्स बढ़ने के लिए टैक्स रेट का बढ़ना ज़रूरी नहीं है, हमें जो टैक्स की जो प्रणाली है उसमें सुधार की ज़रूरत है।
That's right. Mr. Pandey, thank you so much for that crisp discussion. Thank you for joining us in the studios.
Thank you.
And now let's go across on the phone line to the Chief Economic Advisor, K.V. Subramanian. Mr. Subramanian, a warm welcome to the Radio Bridge program.
Good evening.
We have been seeing you on all television channels since afternoon. You have been very, articulate in putting forth your views. For our listeners of All India Radio, tell us, what is your overall assessment of today's budget proposals?
I think that this budget is a dream budget. I'll tell you why I think that is the case. Firstly, the budget came against the backdrop of a once-in-a-century pandemic that India has really handled it well, and there's a V-shaped recovery that is going on. This budget has taken significant steps to provide fillip to that recovery, so that in the coming financial year, India can grow really well at least 11%, 10.5% to 11% in real terms, number one. But at the same time, the budget, having been the first budget of this decade, has also laid important foundation for the Indian economy to grow at high growth rates of 8% plus over this decade. It has taken significant steps in that direction. Let me, list out what are the key areas that leads me to think that this is such a dream budget. Firstly, if you look at healthcare spending, there's been an increase of almost 140% in the expenditure for health. Do remember that health is a state subject, and so 2/3 of healthcare spending by the government comes from state government. So of the 1/3 part, there's been a huge increase from the center, almost 2.5 lakh crores, provided for healthcare. And this has been provided both for preventive and curative healthcare, because the preventive part comes from sanitation, from clean drinking water, which have been provided for, apart from the curative part as well, where the 65,000 crores approximately, the Atmanirbhar Bharat, Swasth Bharat Yojana has been provided for. So that's point number one, healthcare. The second related to that is the provision for vaccination, 35,000 crores. And as I've said in the last couple of days, vaccination is also a vaccine for the economy because it can really bring people back into economic activities, especially in the service sector. The second important part is the financial sector. Even entering into COVID, the Indian financial sector was facing challenges. There have been several steps that have been taken in the financial sector. The first is the bad bank, creation of the bad bank in the private sector, so that it can be effective. The proposal to divest 2 public sector banks and 1 general insurance company. The proposal to set up a development financial institution within the public sector and to enable development financial institutions in the private sector, that infrastructure financing can be provided for. And last but not the least, the insurance FDI limit actually for the insurance sector being raised from 49% to 74% with necessary safeguards about residents being the managers on the board, etc. So the second key part is financial sector. The third is the infrastructure, and as our listeners would certainly appreciate, the infrastructure is really critical, and here roads, railways, and power have been emphasized significantly. A 32% increase in infrastructure on a significantly higher outlay this year itself has been provided for. So when you put this all together to also add in the really realistic estimates and the transparent budgeting that has been done, I think it all amounts to a dream budget.
मिस्टर सुब्रमण्यम, अगर हम इनकम टैक्स की बात करें, काफ़ी ये अटकलें लगाई जा रही थी इंडिविजुअल इनकम टैक्स में, कुछ कंसेशंस, कुछ रिबेट्स मिलेंगी लोगों को, और क्योंकि ख़ास तौर से पेंडेमिक के समय में जिस तरह से जो इंडिविजुअल इनकम पे असर हुआ था, तो उन लोगों को भी इसमें रिलीफ मिल सकता था अगर ऐसा कुछ होता। इसके अलावा स्पेंडिंग के लिए लोगों के पास कुछ ज़्यादा पैसा होता और स्पेंडिंग बढ़ती तो निश्चित रूप से अर्थव्यवस्था को फ़ायदा होता, लेकिन ऐसा कुछ बजट में इस तरह का प्रोविज़न दिखाई नहीं दिया।
देखिए, इसमें आपको ध्यान देना है कि यदि आप भारत की आबादी लेते हैं जो कि 137 करोड़ है, उसमें भी आप जो आबादी काम करती है 15 से 60 के इसमें लें तो करीब जो 70 करोड़ की आबादी है वर्किंग पॉपुलेशन, उसमें से 1.5 करोड़ से कम इनकम टैक्स देती है। तो जो आम आदमी जो हम कहते हैं वो इनकम टैक्स देने वाला व्यक्ति नहीं है, वो इनकम टैक्स देने वाला व्यक्ति तो खास व्यक्ति है भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था में। तो जो प्रावधान किए गए हैं वो ये सारे 137 करोड़ लोगों को लाभ हो उसके लिए किए गए हैं, क्योंकि आप यदि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जो बुनियादी ढांचों पे जब काम होता है, कंस्ट्रक्शन एक्टिविटी खूब बढ़ती है, कंस्ट्रक्शन की गतिविधियां, जिससे कि रोजगार संगठित क्षेत्र में और असंगठित क्षेत्र में दोनों में काफी रोजगार बनता है, और रोजगार से लोगों के हाथों में पैसा आता है। यदि लोगों के हाथ में पैसा डालना है तो रोजगार से बेहतर कोई भी बेहतर प्रावधान नहीं है। तो इससे जो कंस्ट्रक्शन सेक्टर है उससे रोजगार काफी बनेगा। इसी तरह वैक्सीनेशन को लें तो जो आपके जो कॉन्टैक्ट सेंसिटिव सर्विस सेक्टर्स हैं जिनमें रोजगार पे बहुत असर पड़ा है, तो वैक्सीनेशन के लिए जो 35,000 करोड़ दी गई है उससे भी काफी रोजगार में असर पड़ेगा। तो जहाँ पे जैसे कहते हैं कि अंग्रेजी में कहते हैं कि गिव अ मैन टीच अ मैन टू फिश रादर देन गिविंग हिम जस्ट लोव्स ऑफ फिश, या फिर मतलब किसी को मछली ऐसी दान में देने के बजाय उसको यदि मछली कैसे पकड़ना है सिखाया जाए तो वो बेहतर है। वही भारतीय सरकार ने किया है कि रोजगार जो है मछली पकड़ना सिखाने के जैसा होता है, और जो आप जिस ट्रांसफर्स की बात कर रहे हैं वो बस मछली के लिए वो एक बार रहता है। तो ये जो है बहुत ही अहम है, और मेरे अनुसार इसीलिए ये बहुत अच्छा अर्थशास्त्री के दृष्टिकोण से बहुत अच्छा कदम है।
Right, Mr. Subramaniam, thank you so much for joining us on this special Radio Bridge program. And that was the Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. K.V. Subramanian, joining us on this program. And now let's go across to Dr. B.K. Paul, member of Niti Aayog. Dr. Paul, a warm welcome to this
Good
program.
evening.
Yeah,
Thank you.
with you, we will surely, focus on the health sector. Today, we have seen how the provisions have been made targeting the health sector. 35,000 crore rupees for the COVID-19 vaccine. What can the people of this country expect to get free vaccination over a period of time?
Well, Abhishek, this is a budget which will be now going down in the history as a game changer for the health sector, because a big new beginning has been made, and the trend of relatively static or slowly incrementally increasing health budgets is now, that trend has been changed to a deep inputs into the budget to raise its trajectory to a totally new level, and that is what is reflected in the budget. Now, the point about the vaccination part of the budget is, of course, very reassuring first and foremost, and it demonstrates the clear priority that the government is attaching to getting the vaccine to maximum number of people, and also to make sure that no resources will not be a limiting factor for ensuring this such an access. So this is, a fulfillment of the promise which the government had made and repeatedly made, that the resources will not come in the way of vaccine availability to the people of India, and that promise has been fulfilled today by the finance minister.
Dr. Paul,
How we do it is just wait to see. But with this kind of a resource being available, the access to vaccine, and very importantly, as the chief economic advisor was saying, vaccination should not only be seen as saving lives, but also re-energizing fully the economic wheels and the social well-being of the nation.
Yeah, but Dr. Paul, I'm sure you will agree that we have never focused on the health sector as such. If we were to see our spending as a percentage of the GDP, but post-COVID, apart from the vaccination thing, post-COVID, do you think now the focus will come back again on the healthcare sector, whether it is primary, secondary, or tertiary healthcare in the entire country?
I think you can clearly notice that the focus on health is now central to the government's overall agenda for health, and to make health of the people, holistic health, preventive, curative, rehabilitative, all facets of health get the required resources from the state. The public spending will match the expectations of the people in every facet. And therefore, you can clearly see this time around that push is visible, and this push is there to speak for itself. Now, for example, it talks about ensuring urban health and wellness centers in 11,000 in number, giving a fillip to health and wellness centers in rural areas, setting up a 15 health emergency operations center that would be the future hubs of monitoring the disease patterns in the country.
Any kind of health challenge.
To be able to provide orchestrated response to an outbreak like the one that we are seeing.
That's true.
These are just a couple of examples.
Right. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the show late in the evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
और इस बीच हमारे साथ हमारे विशेषज्ञ A.K. भट्टाचार्य जी जुड़ चुके हैं। भट्टाचार्य जी नमस्कार इस बीच कार्यक्रम में। जैसा कि आज बजट के प्रावधानों पर हम चर्चा कर रहे हैं, और बहुत सारी बातें अभी हमने रेवेन्यू सेक्रेटरी से चीफ इकोनॉमिक एडवाइज़र और डॉक्टर पॉल जो मेंबर नीति आयोग है उनके साथ की। अगर आप इस पूरे बजट को देखें तो कौन से ऐसे प्रावधान लगते हैं जो आपको सबसे महत्वपूर्ण लगते हैं, जिनसे ना सिर्फ आम आदमी को फ़ायदा होगा बल्कि एक हमारी पूरी अर्थव्यवस्था को एक इम्पीटस मिलेगा?
देखिए, अगर अर्थव्यवस्था की बात करते हैं तो जो सरकारी खजाना किस तरह से उसका जो एक फिस्कल कंसोलिडेशन प्रोग्राम में ट्रांसपेरेंसी लाया जाता है, मैं समझता हूं कि इस बजट में उसका एक बहुत बड़ा एक पहल लिया गया है। अभी तक जो पिछले साल से ये जो हमें ट्रेंड दिखा था कि जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट में जो ऑफ बजट बोरोइंग्स होती थी वो जरा बाहर रहकर जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट का नंबर था उसमें जरा एक संदेह आ जाता था क्योंकि ये फिस्कल डेफिसिट कम दिखता था। पर इस बार हमने ये देखा है कि जो ऑफ बजट बोरोइंग जो है वो कम हो गया है और अगले साल एक्चुअली कम होकर वो 30,000 करोड़ में आ चुका है। तो कहाँ एक जमाने में 2 साल पहले 1.86 लाख करोड़ था, इस वक्त अगले साल में सिर्फ 30,000 करोड़ का है। मैं समझता हूँ कि जो एक वित्तीय अनुशासन का जो एक जो ट्रेंड जो है वो मैं और बहुत ज्यादा ट्रांसपेरेंसी के साथ किया जा रहा है। और ये हमारी जो भविष्य के लिए ये अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए अच्छा साबित होगा। पहली बात तो ये है। और दूसरी बात जो है मैं संक्षिप्त में कहूंगा कि जो 2-3 जो रिफॉर्म की जो इनिशिएटिव्स ली गई हैं पर्टिकुलरली फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में बैंक प्राइवेटाइजेशन और इंश्योरेंस प्राइवेटाइजेशन और इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर में एफडीआई बढ़ाकर 74% कर देने से मैं समझता हूँ कि ये अगर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ठीक समय से किया जा सके तो इसमें फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में की जो एक जो आयाम जो है वो बदलने की एक आशा जरूर दिखती है।
Yeah, Mr. Bhattacharya, we'll continue our discussion intermittently as we go across to each of our regional centers. Now let's go across to Mumbai, and very quickly we have to be really thrifty on time. We have 5 centers to talk to, and in Mumbai studios we have Uday Damodar, economist, to talk about the budget. Mr. Damodar, what would you say? How do you perceive today's budget announcements?
I would consider this as one of the boldest budget ever, and not only the fiscal deficit has been defined and the way it is going to be spent. Besides, the government is banking on the borrowing, and in addition to the borrowing, the target of 1,75,000 crore for disinvestment is the factor which is not touching the pockets of the common man. And as apparent, what we call is that this budget is covering all the areas, and we have seen that probably with the honor given by the capital market today, with almost 5% increase in both the indices. So it's an overall control, giving impetus to the many industries in that respect. And while doing all these things, health has been on the top priority, and the entire BFSI sector, as we look at, is going to be touched upon, and certain aspects like the railway capital expenses of more than 1 lakh crore, the defense budget being the highest ever, all these things leading to the basically creation of employment and the self-reliance, the Atmanirbharta. I think that's the balance I look in this budget.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Damodar, for putting forth your views.
और कलकत्ता से हमारे जो एक्सपर्ट हैं प्रोफेसर अमित कुंडू वो लाइन पे हैं। प्रोफेसर कुंडू नमस्कार। आप बजट के बारे में आपको क्या लगता है, कौन से ऐसे प्रोविज़न हैं जो रियली इम्पैक्ट डालेंगे और जिससे फ़ायदा होगा, क्या आपका सोचते हैं?
Actually, I do not think it is a dream budget. First thing is that if we look at the Indian economy, where the large number of workers are more than 90% are informal workers. And if basic objective of the economy is that you have to generate demand among this type of sectors. But I have not found any positive step for the generation of employment as well as for demand from this particular sector. We can give support to the supply side. We are giving medium small industries support, but that is not sufficient enough. Okay. Obviously, from the positive side is that huge investment is done on the agricultural sector, but the problem is that here you are getting that you are increase the minimum support price 1.5 times of the cost of production. Actually, the cost of production is basically difficult to calculate, and who will be to calculate and how this is distributed to the individuals. It is very difficult and it is not clear. And second thing is that here most of the Indian farmers are basically marginal farmers. They are not so much literate. That is happening all over the India. and it is not sort of difficult for them to calculate the cost of production and get the minimum price.
No,
Then there should
but
be
Professor
clear
Kundu,
vision about this.
we already have the agricultural produce pricing committee, which takes into
Yeah.
consideration all the input costs and comes up
But
with
input
the
cost is
MSP,
different
the
from
minimum
different
support
states.
price.
Different from different states, not only from other or different from crops to crops.
That is true. That is true. But we have other major big provisions like 5.5 lakh crore rupees for the capital expenditure. Don't you think these are big initiatives which can really have a multiplier
Actually,
effect?
I'm talking about that. The main problem is talking about the demand. That is the energy. It's nothing about the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. You see, we are expecting that some more allocation is required for the rural people because in rural people, India is more than 70% of the people are still living in the rural areas.
Right.
And even the migrant workers, nothing told about the migrant workers.
Okay.
Because if you are giving one country, one ration card, but most of the problem is that the migrant workers are staying in a particular place, their family is living in the other place. Who will get the benefit? No
Okay.
one will say the benefit.
Right.
Obviously, agricultural sector has given some impetus, and obviously minimum support price is required because otherwise, due to the situations, and obviously
Right.
health sector is getting lots of importance. But another thing I like to mention is that disinvestment in LIC and other insurance companies.
Right.
Actually, LIC always plays actually gets lots of faith all over India, particularly common people. And when they think about that, it will be sold. They are using the term "bikri ja hai."
Right, Professor Kundu, thank you so much for joining us on the program. And now let's go across quickly to Lucknow, where we have Dr. Nagendra Maurya joining us on the program. Dr. Maurya, what is your take on the union budget?
मेरे अनुसार जो ये बजट है इसके दूरगामी परिणाम होंगे जो इन्होंने एलोकेशन किए हैं इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर को और हेल्थ सेक्टर को उससे लॉन्ग टर्म रिजल्ट्स आएंगे और इकोनॉमी दोबारा रिवाइवल पैथ पे आएगी. हाउएवर आपने देखा कि अभी पैंडेमिक में जो हमारा एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर था वो एक तरह से एक स्ट्रांग बैकबोन की तरह एमर्ज हुआ.
That's true.
और एक नई जो देखा गया कि जो रोजगार की समस्या है वो एक बड़ी है और बहुत फ्लक्चुएटिंग है. अगर इस तरह से कोई आर्थिक या इस तरह की कोई पैंडेमिक दोबारा आता है तो इकोनॉमी में स्पेशली जो इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर है वो बहुत फ्रेजाइल है. तो बजट में मेरे हिसाब से स्पेशली रूरल सेक्टर में जॉब क्रिएशन और एम्प्लॉयमेंट की अपॉर्चुनिटीज से रिलेटेड थोड़ा सा और कुछ नई स्कीम्स का सृजन किया जा सकता था
जी.
इसके अलावा जो कनेक्शन है मींस रूरल सेक्टर में कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग पे एलोकेशन की थोड़ी सी और जरूरत थी इन टर्म्स ऑफ लिंकेजेस बिटवीन फार्मर्स एंड मार्केट ताकि उनके अपने प्रोड्यूस का बेहतर रिटर्न मिल सके और वो उसको अपनी जो हम फार्मर्स की इनकम डबल करने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं वो जल्दी से अचीव हो सकेगा.
जी.
दूसरा एक मेरा जो पॉइंट है कि आप जब हाई फिस्कल डेफिसिट की बात कर रहे हैं तो देख रहे हैं कि लगभग 20% जो बजट कह रहा है कि हमारा इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट में जा रहा है. तो सरकार को और थोड़ा सा आगे और हमारी जो वित्त मंत्री है उनको ये सोचना चाहिए कि ये जो इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट है जो डेट सर्विसिंग है
जी.
उसका भी बर्डन थोड़ा रिड्यूस किया जाना चाहिए.
जी. धन्यवाद डॉक्टर मौर्य हम लोगों से बात करने के लिए.
And now let's go across to down south, Chennai, where we have V. Murali, who is a taxation expert joining us on the program. Mr. Murali, a warm welcome to this Radio Bridge program. And what is your outlook and what is the outlook of people in Chennai and in Tamil Nadu vis-a-vis the budget? I believe we have lost contact with Chennai. We'll try and reconnect with them in the program. But now, AKB, coming back to you, what would you say? There are other new provisions like the development financial institution to be set up for infrastructure financing with a corpus of 20,000 crore rupees. Don't you think that is going to be a kind of a game changer in times to come?
Well, development financial institutions can go different ways. Development financial institutions as a concept was a favored model. There was a time when it was a favored model more than 30 years ago. But I think over the years, the idea of a state-owned development financial institution will have its own attendant risks. But what I understand from the proposal is that this law will also allow private sector development financial institutions also to be floated. If there are private sector development financial institutions also created, I would say that this will be a good thing, because the taxpayers' money or the government resources should not be directed to create state-owned development financial institutions which will be vulnerable to pressures and influences on lending to projects that may not always pass the test of commercial viability. So
Right.
therefore, it is a double-edged sword. So it has to be used very carefully and cautiously. That is the point I would like to make on development financial institutions.
Yeah, and AKB, we would request you to be with us on the program. We'll continue our
I
discussion.
have to leave. I have given time till 9:50, so I have to leave now. Thank
Fine.
you.
Dr. Bhattacharya, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Bye.
And now let's go across to Guwahati, where we have Gautam Majumdar, who is an associate professor joining us on the program. Dr. Majumdar, would have seen all the discussions which have been taking place across, media organizations, television channels, and the radio. What is your take on the announcements of the union budget today?
I think it's a wonderful budget. If it is implemented the way it is expected to, it can certainly usher in the saga of revival in a post-pandemic scenario and growth of Indian economy. With such an impressive increase in capex, capital expenditure, emphasis on infrastructure, physical infrastructure,
That's true.
agricultural infrastructure, and social infrastructure, I think it can create. It will crowd in. It will have a crowding effect, and that will start the multiplier process. The way we talk in terms of macroeconomy. So in the process, it will address the issues that has plagued the Indian economy from the demand side as well as from the supply side. Can be taken care of. So I'm very, very hopeful and optimistic that the targets that have been assumed in this budget can be achieved. Perhaps certain figures look even conservative. That's quite good.
Yeah.
So 3 years down the line, we should be back where we were, prior to pandemic, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and Dr. Majumdar, you said some of the figures do look conservative. If you recall, the finance minister in her address to the media, she said that the chief economic advisor could be flamboyant, but whereas when the ministry is concerned, it is more conservative in its outlook. Yeah, I want to draw your attention to the provisions made for the railways. 110 more than 1,10,000 crore rupees for the railways, out of which 1,07,000 crores on capital expenditure and expansion in railways. Don't you think that is a big provision which will see to it that the safety and standards in railways is maintained and enhanced?
Sure, definitely. And from being from Northeast, I'm particularly happy because it was also announced that all the broad gauge railway lines will be electrified. No, so far in Assam, in the Northeast, we don't have that. So that will be a big, thing for all of us here. And this connectivity that we lack in, this inadequate connectivity.
Yeah.
This 34,000 crores that have been announced with 1,300 kilometers of national highways. That will go a long way in, what we need, the physical infrastructure. And we must not forget that all this will help in, attaining the potential that can be opened up through active policy of India.
Yeah, and as we were all expecting, that COVID-19 would be the focus of attention. So vaccination, for vaccination, a provision of 35,000 crore rupees have been kept. Isn't that heartening that probably, a large chunk of the country's population will get the vaccine for free?
Yes, that is something remarkable. The second largest vaccination already started and launched, and one feels proud as being an Indian. The way we have, that our government has managed to address the issue, it's quite heartening. And more importantly, the 35,000 crores, perhaps it's for this year, hopefully COVID will be eradicated. But to the level that health has been brought up, that will remain. That's a big thing for us. From a jump from 1.9% of GDP to 3%, and if it remains there and should remain there, then obviously it is a paradigm shift in our focus.
Right. Dr. Majumdar, thank you so much for joining us from Guwahati. And next, let's go across to our regional news unit in Chennai, where we have V. Murli joining us on the program. Mr. Murli, a warm welcome to this Radio Bridge program. Mr. Murli, do we have you online? I think there are some issues. Well, happens in a live program like this. We'll try and get back to our Chennai regional news unit. Listeners, you are tuned in to this special railway, I beg your pardon, special radio bridge program on the Union Budget 2021-22. And it's a live program. As you know, we have been going across to different centers, Mumbai, Kolkata, Guwahati, Kolkata. And finally, we are trying to zero in on Chennai, where we have V. Murli joining us on this Radio Bridge program, where we discuss about the outlook, just a representative kind of a view of each of the centers. Mr. Murli, can you hear us? A warm welcome to this Radio Bridge program.
Yes, sir.
And time is running out very quickly. What would you say? You are a taxation expert. Would you say that it was a big relief that there was no new tax imposed either directly in the name of COVID or otherwise?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are all very, very welcome the budget. Our dynamic finance minister, Honorable Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji, she has presented an excellent budget for 21-22. And what do you say? Innovation, infrastructure, inclusive development. It's a passion with compassion.
Right.
And empathy, not apathy. And they're all putting down the vexatious litigation. In direct taxes, that is the focus. And
cutting down from
Madam
6 to
has
3 years?
converted into stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And our culture is agriculture. She rightly given the focus on agriculture and health. So that's why I said it's a healthy budget and prepared with passion, with compassion.
Wonderful.
And I would say that this comes, everybody was wondering where from the, they'll be able to raise such a big this thing, but without taxing anyone.
Yeah.
By maintaining status quo, she has given such a positive budget, very balanced budget, and everybody know also, the entire people appreciate. And without taxing, without adding anything as such, she has done. And a lot of direct taxes side also, even the senior citizen 75 years and above, with having only pension and interest income, they need
no
not
need to file returns.
Return. Reopening of assessment reduced from 6 years to 3 years, and reducing litigation for small taxpayers, constitution of faceless dispute resolution. Income tax appellate tribunal become a faceless, only electronic communication, relaxation to NRIs, and everything she has done, even dividend, that is giving exemption from TDS, or for that matter, not paying advance tax on dividend when it is not declared or dividend is not received. It's all very practical, down to earth.
Right, Mr. Murli.
It is assessee friendly.
Right, Mr. Murli. Thank you so much for joining us with your feedback and your opinion on the union budget. It was really wonderful. We went across to different centers of the country where people said that the budget has been very well received in their part of the country and city and state. So thank you so much for joining us in this special Radio Bridge program. Goodbye.
Union Budget 2021-22.